INEC says it has no plans to postpone the 2023 polls and has reiterated that the presidential and National Assembly elections will hold on the 25th of February 2023. And hard-hitting and frank Catholic bishop today met with President Buhari alongside his colleagues, where the president would explain in his administration's efforts. Tonight, we'll talk about the state of the nation and what is needed to ensure that the sanctity of the ballot is protected in 2023. Bishop Matthew Kukah is our guest tonight on the program. This is Politics Today, live on Channels Television. I'm Sean Kibaloye in Abuja. Our countdown continues because we're not taking our eyes off the 2023 election. It's 44 days to the polls. And INEC says no going back on this date. Nigerians are anticipating the opportunity to elect their leaders in the February next year polls. So get your PVC and make your vote count, everyone. Tonight, we'll focus on a few issues relating to the sanctity of the ballot, the choice, the hard choice Nigerians have before them to elect the next president and leaders of the nation. Now, what is your role as a citizen? Are you living up to it? And the state of the nation gets our attention. Bishop Matthew Kukah is my guest tonight on the program. But before we get talking, let's check out some of your political roundup stories.
The presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Atiku Abubakar, today continued with his meetings and consultations in the United Kingdom as part of his effort to convince stakeholders about his capacity to steer the affairs of the country. Today, Mr. Abubakar met with the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby.
Atiku remains the best candidate. Atiku remains the most experienced candidate, and by God's grace, Nigerians are very eager to return to a man that has experience to lead Nigeria out of the doldrums we're experiencing today, caused by APC.
The campaign train of All Progressives Congress, APC, today made a stop today in Enugu State. The presidential candidate was accompanied by governors from the region, Governor Dave Umahi of Ebonyi State and Senator Hope Uzodinma of Imo State. The APC team believes the party is on track to win in the February 25th presidential election. The 143-member Presidential Campaign Council of APC in Ekiti State has been inaugurated. The committee is chaired by Ekiti State Governor Biodun Oyebanji and co-chaired by former Governor Kayode Fayemi, and both leaders have called on the committee members and the rank and file within the Ekiti APC to ensure massive mobilization and campaign for the presidential flag bearer. The governorship candidate of the Labour Party in Abia State, Mr. Alex Oti, has promised to give women and youths a pride of place in his administration if elected governor of Abia State. Mr. Oti made the pledge while addressing Labour Party supporters at a rally in Ukuwangu, Uturu, in Isukwato local government area of Abia State. The governor of Ogun State, Mr. Dapo Abiodun, has challenged residents of the state to vote credible and people of integrity in the forthcoming general election, saying that the All Progressive Congress remains a credible party to beat in the elections. He was speaking during a campaign tour and working visit to Iwekorol, Take 2. He was speaking during a campaign tour and working visit to Iwekorol local government area of the state, where he commissioned a 2-kilometer township road. Rivers State Governor Nyesom Wike says an additional 4 years of the People's Democratic Party administration will propel the oil-rich state to a whole new level where no state in the federation can compete in terms of infrastructure development. It says if the PDP governorship candidate is elected to succeed and consolidate on his achievements, no one will believe that Rivers State is part of Nigeria. Cross River State Governor Professor Ben Ayade is calling on the newly sworn-in Commissioner for Homeland Security, Mr. Wogo Umari, to ensure that adequate security is guaranteed in the state during the election. Speaking at a swearing-in of 13 commissioners at the Government House in Calabar, Governor Ayade explained that the safety of citizens in the state must be guaranteed under the general election. The PDP in Enugu State has been reacting to the allegations by APC that it is responsible for the ongoing crisis in the party, calling on the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, to investigate the allegations of fraud and prosecute those found wanting. Some members of the Enugu State chapter of the APC staged a protest against the chairman of the APC in Enugu State, Chief Ugochukwu Agbala, and the governorship candidate of the party, Chief Uche Naji, alleging impunity, gross misconduct, incompetence, divisiveness and embezzlement of party funds. Both men were accused of siphoning 283 million naira provided for the purchase of expression of interest and nomination forms for their party members to make sure that the party fields candidates for all the elected positions in Enugu State, from the governorship to the National Assembly and State Assembly. Meanwhile, the APC chairman said the party has not received a dime from any source except contribution from the party governorship candidates.
There you have it, your political roundup stories, and you are up to date. Speculations are now over on the certainty or uncertainty, as the case may be. There's been some debate in several quarters about the 2023 polls. Now, the electoral umpire today says there is no going back on the sanctity of the date fixed for the election. At the first meeting this year of INEC with political parties, the chairman, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, said the 25th February date is sacrosanct. The commission also presented the 2023 voter register to the parties ahead of the elections as required by the 2022 Electoral Act. The commission presented a register containing 93,469,008 voters for the 2023 general elections. The voter distribution shows that 44,414,846 registered voters are females, while 49,054,062 are males. Take a listen to the INEC chairman.
13,868,441 permanent voters' cards, the PVCs, have been printed, delivered to states, and are being collected by citizens as new voters or by existing voters who applied for transfer or replacement of cards as provided by law. Similarly, following the display of the voters' register nationwide and the conclusion of claims and objections by citizens, a new national register of voters has been compiled. In short, at no time in the recent history of the Commission has so much of the forward planning and implementation been accomplished 44 days ahead of the general election. Therefore, the Commission is not contemplating any adjustment to the election timetable, let alone postponement of the general election. For the avoidance of doubt, the presidential election and the National Assembly elections will hold on Saturday, 25th February 2023, while governorship and state assembly elections will hold 2 weeks later on Saturday, 11th March 2023. The repeated assurance by the security agencies for the adequate protection of personnel, materials, and processes also reinforces our determination to proceed. The 2023 general election will hold as scheduled.
Well then, you have it. INEC chairman, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu. Now, in the other side of town, President Muhammadu Buhari believes his administration has done well in the area of security, and in fact, in the area of economy, feels that those who gave Nigeria loans find the country and its administration credible enough. The president said the gains recorded in security will be further consolidated and more attention will be given to the economy before handing over in May 2023. He was saying all these while receiving executive members of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Nigeria at the State House in Abuja. President Buhari says that security situation had improved over the years, particularly the northeast region, where the focus had shifted to rebuilding infrastructure and reorientation on education. Bishop Kukah was part of the bishops who visited the villa today. Bishop Kukah was in 2022 Christmas message, came hard on the Buhari administration, pointing out those areas he felt things have not gone very well, and he said a lot has failed. In his administration, the bishop had complained bitterly about nepotism, favoritism, and breach of federal character in Buhari's administration. Both men met face to face, and in that picture, one can only imagine what was said from the president to the bishop. Well, tonight, Bishop Matthew Kukah is my guest tonight on the program. He's a member of the National Peace Committee and is a bishop of the Catholic Diocese of Sokoto. Thank you so much, Bishop, for coming today.
Thanks, Shell.
And Happy New Year. It's good to see you,
Thank
sir.
you very much. Thank you.
What was it that the president told you? I saw that the manner in which you laughed was, he must have told you something that was very funny, isn't it?
Well, incidentally, every time we have met with the president, and this stretches back, but every time we've gone as a delegation, there's always been a little bit of something extra. I think that perhaps among my colleagues and a lot of other Nigerians, very few people know that President Buhari and I go back many, many, many years. I remember the first time we went to see him, I was sitting at the extreme end, and he shook everybody. When he came to me, he said in particular, you know, this is my bishop, and you could see the smile on his face. The other time we went to see him with the members of the Peace Committee, you know, we finished taking the photograph, and I looked at him and I said, Mr. President, are we not going to shake hands? You know, because we had finished it. So the photograph was out there. But today, what happened was, we were glad enough to go and greet him. And then his chief of staff for domestic affairs, what's his name? Sarki is a very good friend of mine. And the president knows our relationship. So I shook him. And I didn't know the president was looking at me. As I moved closer, he said to me, you know, why are you shaking him before shaking me? That's why he pointed. That's why, I mean, I just burst into laughter. And then subsequently, when I finally shook his hand, he said to me, you know, this is my most, I forgot whether he said most vocal critic.
Most vigorous fighter.
Yeah. So,
so he called you that, isn't it?
Yeah, he said
you're a vigorous fighter.
No, he said, this is my most vigorous fighter, something to that effect. But I think the president also understands, you know, that I've got a job to do, he's got a job to do. And I think actually he also quite understands the contributions of the Catholic Church. And he knows that a lot of the things we are saying, they're not born out of animosity. And I've tried in my criticisms not to be personal. And like I said to people, look, whoever becomes president tomorrow will still be here by the grace of God. And I'm not going to stop criticizing you because I think we don't do it just for the sake of it. It's that we have an obligation. I think some of us have a bit of an idea about what we could do differently. You know, so there's a sense in which what we're saying is also a source of encouragement. But perhaps let's not take away from the substance of our discussion with the president.
Absolutely. I mean, for someone who wrote the book Witness to Justice, you've seen and experienced some of the worst of this country. And perhaps these are some of the reasons why those of good conscience will always want to speak up in times of dire need, when this nation needs people of good conscience to speak up. And we must applaud you for some of your efforts that you have made in that direction. But from that meeting today, it does look like the president tried as much as possible to speak about his administration's effort, which you heavily criticized that a lot has failed. Were you convinced in his explanation, considering your position on the Christmas Day message?
Look, I mean, you write an examination. The examiner scores you differently. You're convinced you've done your best. Maybe your best is not good enough. I can't take away from the president his conviction that he's got a job to do, and he believes that he's doing the best that he can. And by the way, you know, there's nothing I'm saying that is not being said even louder. There are, of course, the president's critics who prefer that it is better to keep quiet for all kinds of conveniences. But there's nothing I'm saying that. I've never manufactured facts in terms of the things that we're talking about.
But to answer your question directly, the first thing is that the bishops went, and I think maybe when the media presents the clip of what the president of our conference said in the speech that he read, which has not come on the news. But what we essentially wanted to do was to see the president, to encourage him, especially when particularly struck by his commitment to delivering free, fair, and credible elections to, to Nigeria and to Nigerians. And in his speech to the bishops today, one of the things he said, and I've had him say this repeatedly, I tried to be president 3 times, I didn't succeed. This is what the Supreme Court did to me, and so on and so forth. And guess what? In 2003, when the president went to the Supreme Court, one of the documents he had as part of building up of his case was a report by the Catholic Bishops' Conference Justice and Peace Commission that we had monitored the elections. And he fell back on that report to justify the fact that the claims he was making had moral content. So we've remained quite consistent in that regard. And what we did was we've just published a new statement, which is going to come out very soon. If the statement is ready, that's what we took to the president, among other things, and to say, look, we are committed to supporting this process and to ensure that Nigeria is able to cross this threshold, for us to move forward. As to my position about what he had to say, look, the president has got only 4 months to go. The best we can do is probably just keep pushing until these 4 months are over, and then we'll see what the system will deliver to us. And I think this is why these elections are so critical and so crucial to every Nigerian.
I mean, you said as much that who will quarrel with the fact that our glory has departed as a country, where is our voice respected today, even within the African continent. You said it is sad that despite your lofty promises, you are leaving us far more vulnerable than when you came. And the corruption we thought would be fought has become a Leviathan, and sadly, a consequence of a government marked by nepotism. But, I mean, the spokesperson of the president, Femi Adesina, came hard on you and criticized your position. But you saw him face to face today. How does that feel, though?
Look, all of this is in a day's job. Look, I always tell people, frankly, I don't worry about criticisms because I consider myself an academician, and to that extent, intellectuals thrive in debate, discussions, and process. So I never take offense that somebody does not agree with me. Femi's got a job to do. He's actually a pastor. He's got a job to do. On a good day, we probably should be, but he's got a job to do. He's being paid for his job. I've got my own job to do. I'm not being paid for his job, for my job. But he knows that there's nothing personal about what I have to say. I've read a lot of their criticisms, but they don't bother me because some of the criticisms tend to move away from the things I have said. Mm-hmm. I read his statement. I didn't think there was any reason for me to respond to what he had to say. And I remember the last time I was at the villa, Femi says to me, rather jokingly, Bishop, you're always criticizing our government. So you have come here. And I say, well, I was criticizing government before you came, and I'll be criticizing government well after you're gone. So, as I said, he's got a job to do. I've got a job to do. I hope that very soon he will all somehow meet down the line and continue with our process of building our nation. But for me, it's always nothing personal.
I mean, for a government that you think has failed Nigerians, and on a day as this that the president says security started out and we're going to consolidate economy, we're getting credible and all of that. And on a day as this, I mean, there must be some lessons that those who are aspiring to be in that same office should learn. You've not ceased speaking every other time when you see something and you are always at the advantage when an election is coming because you're a member of the National Peace Committee. So you see a lot of things that most Nigerians are not seeing. If there is something that you would like to tell the president tonight, his time is almost out. But if there's something that he needs to do because you have described that government as not worked up to par based on the expectations that you have, what would that sort of thing be?
Look, my views about this government and my criticisms have not shifted a bit. I mean, I'm quite consistent with the fact that I don't think we've managed power sharing effectively.
the president is within his call to say that this is how well he has done. But I know that I speak for millions and millions of Nigerians who believe that we are nowhere, anywhere close to where we ought to have been. I think that the president, in the silence of his own room, would probably look back and say he knows he could have done better. But that throws up a range of other things as to the level of preparedness of those who want to govern Nigeria. Because one of the things the president kept saying to excuse himself is that we didn't know it was so bad. Well, guess what? It's like you're setting out and you're going to Jos. And to get to Jos is about 3 hours drive or so. You cannot set out for Jos with half a tank and then start a journey and say, oh, I didn't know Jos was so far. The point is that when politicians claim that they want to solve problems X, Y, Z, the most important thing is, and I think this is one of the things that is seriously lacking in the Nigerian situation, a real critical analysis and appreciation of the complexity of the problems of this country. So, for example, look, this country is severely broken. If you're going to fix this country, it takes more than just having the good intention. Good intentions are sufficient, but they are not enough, to justify. So the issue is that there are forces. I mean, I'm driving around your premises here. I drove around here for about 10 minutes. And every time I drive around this premise, I just shake my head. Where is all this money coming from that Nigerians are putting up these gigantic structures all over the place? Where's the money coming from? For a country that is severely malfunctioning, for a country that is the poverty capital of the world.
You mean in the Asokoro?
Yes. Yeah. And I'm saying, where is all this money coming from? And Nigerians are sick and they are dying. So that tells you, and I've said this severally, and I don't mean, I've said governance in Nigeria is a criminal enterprise. People, I watched The Godfather. I'm sure you know the
Absolutely,
movie.
that's
Now, I always tell people the opening scene in The Godfather. This gentleman called Bonacera walks up to the Godfather and he says, "Look, Godfather, this is what has happened to me. They beat up my daughter, blah blah blah." And he says, "I went to court, and the judge just looked at me and gave them a suspended sentence." And he said, "Because I felt injured by the courts, that's why I've come to you, Godfather." Remember what Godfather says to him. Godfather looks at him and says, "Why did you go to the courts? Why didn't you come to me? Why did you go to the police?" That's where we are in Nigeria. That because of this criminality in governance, you now have a situation in which for you to come with a first-class degree, from Oxford, from Harvard, from Cambridge, from anywhere, in petroleum engineering, and think that you can walk into the NNPC and get a job, the gate man will tell you are crazy. That's not how you get a job in Nigeria. If you think that because you've worked very hard in the military, in the police, in all this security, and you think because you're so good, you deserve a promotion, even the people running the system will tell you that's not good enough. Now, when we get to that threshold, as we have in Nigeria, where integrity, competence, capacity have been traded for something different, then you are in trouble. And that's why, if we don't get to the heart of the consequences of nepotism, I'm not looking forward to a president of Nigeria who is a Christian or who is a Catholic, or who will, for example, just turn a lot of these things upside down and begin to punish other people for the sins that they didn't commit. So I'm not hoping that a Christian will be president or anybody will be president and say, no, it's now time for us to do what those who came before us did. And when you raise this issue, these are the kind of things you hear from people in government. That, Jonathan did this, Jonathan did that. So the fact that we didn't succeed suggests very clearly we didn't prepare for this examination. Okay? And that the lesson we take away is that I believe Buhari is a good man. He's done his best. But his best was not enough. His best speaks to the quality and level of his preparedness and his ability to assemble a team.
I'd like to ask you, Bishop, do you think going into this election, and perhaps in any election as that, because of the complexity of the nature of our country and our people, and I'll say peoples of Nigeria, do you think that the issue of fair sharing of power is something that needs to be well thought out? Because some people will tell you that that is not expressly described in the Constitution, whether or not the issue of political balancing and all of that are not clearly stated. It's just political party arrangement. But is it think that it's only fair for political elites to consider that?
First of all, I'm not sure you have I think you overstate the issue when you talk about a political elite. We don't have a political elite in Nigeria. We don't have a political culture in Nigeria. Almost everybody contesting elections in Nigeria goes between 2, 3, and 4 political parties. So what you have are just mere contraptions that people who are desperate to ascend this honeypot will climb anything, to be able to get to power. So we're not even talking of a political elite that has a consistent ideological set of principles that they go by. How often have you had politicians tell you, for example, oh, the manifesto of our party was written in my bedroom? I can tell you that these are the stories we've had. You are a journalist, so you probably know better than myself. Suggesting very clearly that the kind of discipline that you require to build a political culture does not exist in Nigeria. So here we are, and I've said it very openly, you can verify from the Constitution what the provisions that it makes. Every political party in Nigeria, for example, is supposed to derive inspiration from Chapter 2 of our Constitution that promises us, it reads almost like a textbook, from the Bible. It promises us all this. Then it tells us they are not justiciable. But even what is most critical is that we are hearing the persistence of things that are contrary to the Constitution, such as, for example, if the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, can you slaughter somebody because he has offended your culture or offended your religion and get away with it? Is it possible if we are living under the same Constitution? So clearly what you're saying, people's enthusiasm for every process will be determined by how much and what they think about what the outcomes are going to be. So if Nigerians feel, and I personally have a burden, because I'm encouraging people to go out and vote. They go out to vote. I travel. I just came back. I spent about a week, in my village. I travel around most of my area, and it's not because it's my village. Most parts of Nigeria, and it's as if government never existed at all. This is after 8 years. So the question is, why will an ordinary Nigerian feel persuaded to go out and vote, only for him to die or him or her to die? And know there are no consequences for those who have taken a life. So that is why it's not enough for us, and we'll continue to encourage our people to go out and vote, but traffic must change from the other direction. That is that those who govern us must take full responsibility for the consequences, because a lot of the things about violence, ordinary Nigerians are very simple people to govern. Everybody will tell you that. But the battles that we are fighting, the violence, doesn't suggest that it's because people don't like one another.
I'm worried though, although we have about a minute to break. Why are we where we are today? How did we get here?
Very good question. The first thing is where is here? If you don't know where you are going, anywhere is a destination. There has never been a clarity as to what kind of country do we want to build. The Americans said in 1776, we are committed to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now, if you make that point, and you're talking about a united country, then every culture becomes subordinated to the principles of the Constitution. So we've been pretending to be in a democracy, but we're not running according to any set of rules and norms. Okay? And to that extent, and because we're not doing that, that is why we're not progressing. So if you ask, how did we get here? We got here by throwing away the journey map. Okay? And because unless we go back to those principles that are enunciated in the Constitution, democracy will just simply be a system by which individuals continue to exchange, the grid and they, reposition themselves to continue with the same logic and principle of looting the country, making themselves rich while the people themselves are getting poor.
We'll try to get the benefit of your advice and wisdom tonight, because Nigerians are at that moment where some people are confused, some people are undecided, some people have doubts about who the next president should be, and we'll try as much as possible to dissect from your own understanding what the problems are, how we can solve it, and who can perhaps best fit into solving this problem. But we need to take a break, Bishop. And when we come back, I'll be talking again, and we'll be back in the conversation with Bishop Matthew Kukah. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be right back. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us right here. Bishop Hassan Matthew Kukah, the Bishop of the Sokoto Diocese of the Catholic Church and the convener of the National Peace Committee, is guesting out on the program. Thank you indeed, Bishop, for your time tonight. I was asking you how we got here and why we are here. But again, you've dispelled the fact that we do not have a political elite consensus in this country. But how can we develop a political culture? Because now we need to have a direction. We need to have an agreement as a people of where we want to go and how we need to achieve that common agenda as a people, isn't it?
Yeah, but you think the first thing is maybe it's too much to say there is no agreement among the political elite. There's agreement about stealing the resources of Nigeria. On that, there's no problem. Political elite are united in that regard. The result is the pauperization of the entire Nigerian populace. The result is the kind of dysfunctional environment that we now live in. The result is the insecurity, the cloud of insecurity that surrounds us. The result and the consequence of this is that we're living in a country where, with all our education, from president to the entire military apparatus, to every segment of the Nigerian society, we are living in mortal fear of people who have crawled out of we don't know where, with no education, with no sign of civility. You look at all these bandits that are trying to overrun our country. Now, these are the consequences and these are the things that you experience when the right people are not in the position that they are supposed to be in. So developing a political elite takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of planning. And it's beyond generations. It takes hundreds of years. However, the average Nigerian will ask you, when you say, England or America or any of these places has taken a long time, they'll ask you, so are we supposed to wait for that length of time? Of course, a lot of things happen without television and without the media bringing us to where we are now. So there's a sense of urgency among our people. Why are we not like America? Why are we not like... You're not going to solve the problem by creating the impression, oh, it took them too long to get to where they are. We can at least see some minimum conditions. Like the beggar in northern Nigeria will tell you, if begging is going to be prosperous today, on Friday, by Wednesday I should get an idea. So the stories we are hearing, and I think what we require is a clarity of thought that suggests very clearly that Nigerian politicians do understand what the people of Nigeria want. And the things they want are not the same, they're not different from the things everybody wants anywhere. So that is that people just want to be able to do ordinary things without a problem.
The basics.
Get up, send your child to, send your children to school, go to a university and hope to graduate. Graduate and hope that even if you don't get a job, a government is creating a necessary condition for you to be able to function optimally. But a situation where a huge generation of our young people with university degrees are proudly talking about the fact that they've descended to either making kuli-kuli, or they are now mechanics, or they are now selling newspapers, or they are doing... It's not a question of how much money you are making. Is that if it was just to sell newspapers, if it was just to shine shoes, did I need to go to a university? So the question is that the Nigerian political elite, because it does not appreciate the complexity of the situation that we have, is unable to address some of the practical issues. And that's why I've said it persistently, and because it's quite insulting when politicians tell us, oh, see the bridges we've built, see the roads we've constructed, see the houses we've built, see the things we've done. Now, democracy was not meant to deliver those kind of things, because in the worst dictatorships, whether it's South Africa under apartheid, whether it is Germany under Hitler, indeed, the best infrastructure is never created in a democracy. So democracy is about, and a lot of the benefits of democracy are actually intangible. A feeling of insecurity, there is a way, when a Nigerian goes to a medical doctor, he says, I'm feeling one kind. You can't put your finger on what exactly, but things are not right. And that's how ordinary Nigerians now feel. We're in a democracy, but we're not seeing the dividends. We're not seeing the benefits. And that is why occasionally Nigerians get nostalgic, because the future is always worse than the past. And so for me, we need to see a little bit of excitement and a little bit of evidence that people really understand what it takes to fix a country that is like ours.
We still have, we will see politicians for over a month, 44 days to campaign before the election. What are the big issues before us?
The big issues are huge. We're hearing basically the promises we had in 2019, the promises we had in 2015. They're not different from the promises we've had, which is that people are promising, and even the person making the promise and the people receiving the promises also know that the person making you the promise simply wants to massage your ego, and that they really no intention of fulfilling those promises. In part because we've not created an opportunity. So, for example, you see all these politicians, they're moving, it's just a huge bazaar. You go to a stadium, you gather people, you rent a crowd, and then you speak for 1 minute, or you speak for 2 minutes, or you don't speak at all. And then everybody packs his bags and goes home. Now, and this is where I think the contribution of the elite then becomes very important. That is that it is our responsibility, and the political class needs, for example, to be able to open up, to receive fresh ideas. Because look, I mean, you're sitting here as a journalist after a lot of training. The man operating this camera went through a lot of training. The man cleaning the floor. Everybody has a bit of training and certification. Politics is the only thing in Nigeria that you don't need a certificate to participate in. And this is how all kinds of people with dubious, personalities have found themselves in politics. The result is the toxicity that we see in our political system. However, if you take American politics, for example, or even British politics, you take American politics, when a Democrat comes to power, you will see the result. I was at the Kennedy School. When Democrats come to power, you see almost like a bit of hemorrhage, traffic of human beings, professors with expertise moving to Washington. If a Republican comes to power, they're likely to do the same from Yale. So ordinarily, University of Abuja, Nasarawa State University, all of these institutions, political parties ought to have part of the academic elite, helping them with analysis, helping them with thinking, helping them with promises. Because at the end, you might ascend the throne and sit. You have office. Power comes from a proper understanding of the issues. And you may not necessarily have that knowledge. Because the problem we have is that we are running a system that thrives in feudalism. Okay, and feudalism survives based on myth. The myth of the divine right of kings. So I'm sitting there on a throne, and all that people have to do is to come and bow down before me, and so on. Now, real democracy is about an exchange of ideas, and the president should be open to new and fresh ideas. That's why the things that some of us do, I sleep peacefully because I believe I'm making my own contribution. So the point is that the very fact that you can see where our universities are, so just very seriously that the political elite have just decided literally that our minds are going to be closed.
I mean, but Bishop, help us tonight. Millions of people who are watching this program tonight are described, some as undecided, some are confused, some don't even know whether or not they should participate.
You cannot be
the choice. How can they make an
Why will
choice?
anybody be undecided about hunger? Why will anybody be undecided about insecurity? Why will anybody be undecided over the fact that they don't seem to know where the next meal is going to come from? Why will anybody be undecided over the fact that there are no jobs? Why will anybody be undecided about that? So there needs to be a vigorous battle to overcome cynicism. Okay? And when it comes to political choice, let's also be modest in our expectations, because sometimes people say, oh, we vote for the right candidate. There's nothing like a right candidate in elections. The right candidate may be a projection of your emotions. But after all, what are we faced with? I live in Sokoto. In 2015, when Buhari was elected president, about 9 or 10 young people killed themselves out of excitement. They just rode motorcycles and crashed. Somebody trekked from Lagos to Abuja in excitement. That young man came to my office in Sokoto to tell me that he trekked from Lagos. He's the one. He was the trekker, and that nobody has looked at him. I said, Oga, I not trek with you now. Which one is my own? So political outcomes, even if you have the free, fair, and the most credible elections, there's always no correlation between that and performance.
So when Nigerians are listening to these people, when they are pitching them their ideas to these politicians, how can people who need to go and vote make up their mind on who to vote for?
What I try and tell people is, look, let me repeat something I've said before, and I like it. When you enter an aeroplane and the plane is about to land, you hear these air hostesses. One of the things they will tell you is, when the plane lands, be careful when you are opening the overhead locker, because items must have shifted during flight. Now, it's a very important announcement, because they said they could fall and cause injury. I take that very seriously, because between all these candidates who are running, asking us to vote for them, even if you vote for what you consider to be the best, items will shift during flight. That means that, after all, items shifted. That is why we've ended up where we've ended up. President Buhari said he was going to end corruption. He said he was going to end banditry. Now we're only doing minuscule analysis of the things we have achieved. There are still hundreds of miles of things undone. So there is a difference, and this is why Nigerians must also address the fact that you are never going to have what you call, maybe use the word, the right choice. Because the 10 or so or 15 people who are competing, we don't know who is going to win. The challenge is actually how prepared we are to engage these people after they've been elected. And that is where civil society, trade unions, town unions, groups, media, church, everybody. Because without engagement, these people take you for granted. And the tragedy with the Nigerian situation is that those in power cripple all the institutions to the extent that institutions that should work for us. You go to court, the big man says, I'm already there. You go to the police, the big man says, I'm already there. You go to the security agencies, the big man says, you're already there. So even processes for choosing those who are going to be in these services should be more open and transparent, because a situation where the president himself has the sole monopoly of choosing people that he believes are loyal to him defeats the purpose of how you organize a nation, because it just assumes that the president's intentions will cover the rest of us. So the processes of electing people and giving them responsibility after elections have been concluded, these are critical issues.
Would the elections make any difference?
No, elections will make a difference. Elections will make a difference. But guess, look, the very fact that we are exercising this choice, okay, that's bad part of the beauty of democracy. But also the point is that you have a right to vote, but you also may discover that in making that vote, in casting that vote, okay, you might have made a mistake. After all, why do people divorce? People fall in love. They're ready to die for one another. Then they get married, and somehow things don't work out, and they go their separate ways. People go to the seminary to train to become priests, and they become ordained priests. It's not everybody who is ordained as a priest that dies as a priest. So what I'm saying is, the challenge for us in politics, just like in real life, is that we fall and we rise. We fall and we rise. The business of the church, for example, people like myself, is to continue to encourage people. So for us, there are many people who might say, after what they have experienced, what am I going to vote for again? All right? But we vote to hopefully correct the mistakes. But in correcting those mistakes, sometimes you dig a hole to fill a hole. So, but I think we shouldn't take this opportunity that we have to cast our votes, to elect those we want to lead us. Those we like may not be the ones who have been voted. But part of the beauty of democracy is that, Argentina took the World Cup. What the hell? Everybody didn't want Argentina to win, but they've won. So it's that in this competition, people have to be trained in terms of how to accept outcomes.
So I'm wondering, why does this violence persist? There's a lot, one of the fears that people had, and thinking that this election might not go on well, considering the violence that we are seeing, and the threat that if this goes on, it might affect the election. Why does the violence persist?
Look, the violence, you can hear people. There are videos now that you cannot believe people in their right minds are saying the things they are saying. So when people say, for example, we must continue in this line, all right? People are calculating the benefits that have accrued to them, and they do not want things to change, all right? Violence is inevitable in most parts of Africa, largely because to become a president, and it has been said severally, people said to be governor of the central bank, for example, you can become a millionaire. You followed all the narrations. So it is the reward system in the political system that encourages violence. Because if you see the almost automatic change in quality of life and the opportunities that come to people who are holding public office or who win elections, you realize that because the rewards are a zero-sum game, to be out, like somebody said, you lose elections, you could actually lose your life. So to the extent that we have a political system that rewards you directly. So, for example, if you voted for the wrong candidate, you may not have a road to your village. You may not have light to your village. You may not have drinking water. So the consequences on this creates the desperation among Nigerians that our man or our woman must get in at all costs. Otherwise, if politics were just for service, we wouldn't have needed to fight about services. So all these people who are telling you, vote for us, will work for you, the history suggests something completely different.
Yeah. Perhaps this is about how we're going to anchor on the program. And my biggest concern is sometimes if you do not know how much of power you wield as a person, you may not know even how to use the power. The young people of this country have way over 60% of the voting population. And I mean, over the years, we're seeing how the voting turnout has gone down. What would you say to the young people who are watching tonight of the need for them to take their destinies into their hand and the realization of their place, especially in the 2023 election?
Look, being young is a transitional phase of life. I was young, but now I'm an old man. And the youth are not necessarily a cohesive unit, nor are they totally innocent. You can see from even their own alliances and the things that people are saying. So it is to say that, first of all, every young person is a citizen. But now that they realize their numbers, you can say the same thing about women. You know, people keep saying women are the majority of the voters, but the power and the reward that they get in politics is not commensurate with their numbers. There is what I might call a certain kind of disempowerment from the pillars of power. And they affect young people negatively. And they affect the powerless negatively. They affect poor people negatively. So sometimes it's not enough. Many people will tell you, for example, that one of the reasons why people are critical about what Jonathan did or didn't do was that he came from a background that didn't threaten anybody and did not have perhaps how many Ijos were holding the commanding heights of power, so to say. So the question is that you may come into power with all the best of intentions. But if you do not have, and this is where transparency then becomes important, because if you don't know how you're going to become the Inspector General of Police tomorrow, how you're going to become Chief of Army Staff, how you're going to get promoted to the next rank, how you're going to become Director of State Security or whatever, if you don't know those processes and you leave them to chance and to the discretion of the man in power, then what you're going to have is that, and this is why when you hear me sound so critical about nepotism, it is that it is destructive. It's a cancer. It affects the outcomes. It affects the confidence of people. So, and it is the worst form of corruption you can think about. So for me, it's not just about young people. Okay, young people can bring in a government in power, all right? But will the reward system be commensurate with what their aspirations are?
And it takes me to this fact, which I'd like you to maybe in 30 seconds wrap up quickly. This Japa syndrome. I mean, the drift continues. How do we arrest it?
You don't need to arrest it. Look, you don't need to arrest it. Ireland would not have been what Ireland has become now, were it not for the diaspora who moved, over 100 years and so ago. Israel is only what? Israel is barely 10 million people. But tell me what part of the world can push Israel around. Only 10 million people, about the population of Lagos, or less than the population of Lagos. So it's not about how many people are at home. It's about what are people bringing home. And if you look at the Southwest, and you look at the Southeast, the Igbos and the Yorubas, for example, most of their local landscapes have been changed, by the resources coming from the diaspora. The critical question for me, and I think that even the diaspora program ought not to be what it has become, because it's a question of how do you harvest these resources. And because we're still operating rather dysfunctionally, Nigerians cannot make up their mind, should those in diaspora contribute, can they vote, and so on. So for me, critical to it is we're not going to stop anybody from going to wherever they are going. The only thing we can do is engage them, take them sufficiently seriously.
Bishop Hassan Matthew Kukah, the convener of the National Peace Committee and the Bishop of the Catholic Diocese of Sokoto, thank you so much for your insight tonight. We appreciate it. Thank you so much indeed. It's good to see you again. That's how we anchor in the program tonight. Many thanks everyone for watching. I'm sure Kimale, I'll see you tomorrow. God bless Nigeria.